Another wireless technology that we'll discuss, although it really has nothing to do with 802.11 networks, is radio frequency ID or RFID technologies. Now, RFID is getting a lot of widespread use over the past couple of years. It's used both in the consumer and the business worlds. And what we do is we use it to track inventory, to control equipment, to prevent people from stealing things from a store, and things like that. You can even use this in payment methods. Some credit cards are embedded with RFID transmitters receivers. Now, what RFID, if you've seen it, it really makes itself known in those small tags that are attached to items. So if you walk into a bookstore, for example, there could be an RFID tag hidden in one of the pages of the book, and when you walk out with the book, then the RFID goes through a sensor and it triggers an alarm. Now, obviously, that has to be turned off if the book is paid for. Now, you'll see a lot of these again in stores to prevent theft and so forth, but you'll also see these in consumer applications as well. One thing about RFID is it has a very limited range. There are two types of RFID systems that are basically out there, with some variation. There's passive RFID and there's active, and we'll talk about both. Passive systems are those that have no internal power themselves. The example that I gave earlier about an RFID tag being in something like a book from a bookstore is not an active RFID. It's passive. It actually can't send power or send transmitted signals out itself, but it can receive them. So it receives those signals and uses those signals as power to transmit an answer back to the station. And typically those stations will be those things that you see next to the doors as you're leaving a store. Those have RFID receivers and transmitters in them. Now, RFID has a limited range, at least the passive ones do, of about 12 feet. Now, the active systems have an internal battery, so they are powered, and they can transmit stored information when a transmitter or a reader that has special software on it queries the RFID tag itself. And you can have a range of actually just a few inches to a few hundred feet. And you may use these in large-scale warehouses for inventory and equipment control as well. Now, some of these RFID systems require a passcode for authentication, although typically those passcodes are very weak, not complex at all, and they're typically not encrypted. That makes them easily sniffed. They can be intercepted, and the data can be sniffed as well. It's very easy to spoof an RFID data transmitter and the data that may come from it if you know how it works. Now, a lot of the security issues that people are concerned with RFID include data theft and privacy. For example, a lot of RFID embedded credit cards are susceptible to spoofing attacks because they can be subject to transmissions from a reader that can cause the credit card to respond and send back information to the transmitter. They're passive, but they can send data back because the radio signal powers them. So that can enable people to steal information, such as your credit card information and so forth. There's a big thing on the internet about advertising for wallets that actually protect against RFID transmission, for example, that you would put your credit cards into. Another issue with RFID is privacy, because theoretically, if you have something like a credit card in your wallet that is RFID enabled, you can be tracked. As you pass by different RFID stations, transmitters, and so forth, your location could actually be tracked. And so there are some concerns out there with privacy and with data theft that are valid concerns. Now, in terms of 802.11 networks, they don't have a lot to do with them, but again, this is a burgeoning area that a wireless professional could get into and make a good career out of. So it's something you ought to look into as a wireless security professional.